Recording. And the first person that we have going for us tonight is Lakin. If I said that right, I apologize. Go ahead, Lakin.
Hi, yes, thank you. You said that right, Logan.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Good job.
Nice job. Yeah, it is not everyone gets it on the first try, that's for certain. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Lakin Rivet, and I am in Dr. Wedding's practical machine learning class this quarter, so 422. And today I will be presenting on, let me share my screen quickly. Okay, today I will be presenting on the California Privacy Rights Act. So, what is the California Privacy Rights Act? The CPRA is a ballot measure approved by California voters on November 3rd of 2020. In essence, the CPRA is an extension of the California Consumer Privacy Act, otherwise known as the CCPA, and that took effect in January 1st of 2020. So the primary goal of the CCPA was to give California consumers more control over the personal data that was being collected. And as California was the first state in US history to pass consumer privacy legislation, the CCPA became very well known among our data science community. However, the CPRA will be going into effect on January 1st, 2023, which means those who work in California in the data industry, or those who have customers who are citizens of California, will need to be aware of these new regulations that are going to begin this following year. They will be enforced by the Attorney General of California and the newly established California Privacy Protection Agency. So, what new regulations are going to come with the CPRA? The CCPA, the original act, established 6 rights for consumers in California. These included the right to know about personal information collected and how it's used or shared, the right to delete personal information collected, the right to opt out of the sale of personal information, the right to opt in to the sale of personal information of consumers under 16, the right to non-discrimination for exercising your CCPA rights, and finally, the right to initiate a private cause of action or a lawsuit for data breaches. So the 2 new rights that were added are going to come into effect the first day of the new year. And these will include the right to correct inaccurate personal information about yourself and the right to limit use and disclosure of sensitive personal information. Due to the usage of this new phrase, sensitive personal information, the Act also provides a definitive way to categorize this type of data. So SPI is considered to be personal information that reveals anything from social security numbers to account logins to precise geolocation, race, ethnic, religious beliefs, union membership, and a more hot topic per se is also genetic data. So something of the company of Ancestry or 23andMe, that is also considered sensitive personal information under this new legislation. The CPRA also established that in addition to businesses, service providers, and third parties, a new category of contractors must comply with regulations as well. So contractors must use personal information only to perform services on behalf of a business as specified in their contract. They must comply with the terms of the said contract, implement security safeguards, not combine personal information received from a given business with any personal information received from another business, and they must notify the business that they are in contact with regarding the use of any subcontractors. If any of the aforementioned entities do not comply with the CPRA regulations, they may be subject to civil penalties, which could be up to $7,500 per violation, damages to consumers impacted by security breaches, non-monetary relief for those same victims, and they may be subject to an injunction brought on by the Attorney General. However, it should be noted that there is an opportunity to cure any alleged violation within 30 days of receiving notice to prevent non-compliance consequences. So, how do we stay on top of all of these new regulations? First and foremost, Take it upon yourself to read through these new pieces of legislation thoroughly and contact legal counsel in the event of unclear or ambiguous wording. Next, company data governance policies may need to be revised in order to reclassify different types of data, such as the newly established sensitive personal information. This may also require rethinking storage and practice with such pieces of data. In addition, know where your data comes from. Most companies have users all over the US, so it's essential that we track and flag those who come from states with regulatory legislation such as the CPRA. And because companies have the opportunity to remedy violations within the 30 days of notice, it is essential that we closely monitor communication channels for such notices. And finally, as data scientists, it's essential that we are actively aware and involved in the national conversation regarding data privacy. After all, we are the ones who understand the true power of data. Thank you so much for listening, and here are my sources that I used to put together the presentation.
No, thank you very much, Lakin. You know, and a lot of us here, there's at least somebody else on the call here I know that is also involved in healthcare, and you know, we can refer to a lot of these type of concepts that you mentioned in terms of our industry as well across the country. You know, with PHI data and HIPAA laws and things like that. So, very relevant presentation. That was excellent. And I forgot to mention earlier here, if somebody wanted to go ahead when you present, if you have like a PowerPoint that you put extra time into, like you did there, if you don't mind forwarding that to myself, I'd appreciate it because I'll shoot that off to Dr. Wedding and you get a few extra points for that as well. If you did have something put together too. So too.
Awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
forgot to mention that earlier.
Great.
Awesome, a great presentation there. I'm going to go ahead and I will put my contact information as well in the chat in case anybody needs to reach out to me at any time, or if anybody ever wants to reach out to me about these presentations and has questions, feel free to do that as well. We can get you in contact with the right person. So thanks again, Lakin. The next person we're going to go to here is Alan. Alan, are you ready to go here, sir?
Hi, yes. So I can go
Yep.
ahead and share my screen.
Yep, the floor is yours. Take it.
Great. All right, today we are going to talk about dimension reduction techniques. So this includes PCA, called Principal Component Analysis, as well as other techniques. So we do have a section for data science machine learning class 422. We have a section called PCA, and I'm going to give some context regarding that and some extensions related to that as well. So first of all, dimension reduction refers to the process of reducing the number of attributes, otherwise known as features or X variables in a data set, while keeping as much of the original variation as possible in the original data set. So in the data science pipeline, machine learning pipeline, this is part of the data pre-processing step. So we perform dimension reduction before training the model. And the great news is that this can be readily implemented by using Python and scikit-learn libraries. So what are some advantages of using these techniques? So first and foremost, I have two highlighted in green, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. So dimension reduction helps reduce overfitting, and that lowers variance. So that is a problem that is very common in machine learning, and it also helps. In addition to those, it's helpful for visualizing data, for factor analysis, for removing noise, and it can also be used for many applications such as image processing and transforming nonlinear data into more linear data. Also, by using these techniques, we require less training time and less computational resources, which leads to increased performance in machine learning. So the first screen point is regarding dimension reduction. So how that can reduce overfitting. So we have a series of diagrams here, which really illustrate the bias variance trade-off in machine learning. So basically, we see, if we focus our attention to the top right, so overfitting basically means that we fits the training data too well so that when it goes to our testing data, we won't be able to model that as well. And we see the variations of that being explained here. So for example, if we overfit, this model can no longer work for a lot of training data. So again, dimension reduction helps reduce overfitting. And on that note, dimension reduction also helps reduce the multicollinearity problem. So multicollinearity is a statistical concept where several independent variables in a model are correlated with each other. So for example, let's say if we want to predict the blood pressure of someone and we use both the weights and the BMI, those two variables are actually related with each other. So there can be some interaction effects over there. So dimension reduction helps to clear that up. So the most famous of these dimension reduction methods is called principal component analysis. And I have some points about that in detail here, but in summary, PCA is an unsupervised linear transformation technique, and it can reduce the number of variables needed, and it can remove correlations among features. Those are some benefits, but there are some drawbacks as well. And that includes information loss to some extent and making the variables less interpretable to you and me as everyday people. But to machines, this is great, and we can see a lot of benefits to that. Some more specifics regarding PCA. So PCA, basically it rotates the coordinate axes and it creates new axes that captures as much variance as possible. And these are called principal components, which are linear combinations of the original variables. They're ranked by their variance, which are eigenvalues from highest to lowest. They are uncorrelated with each other. And then given P features, we choose the lower number of PCAs, where K is less than P. And then it's just, we usually standardize our data before performing PCA. So I can go into some more detail here, but basically some really neat mathematical techniques, which really lies in foundation in the simple Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then using higher dimension vectors in order to transform the data. Then voila, we have new principal components. So that is just one of the many methods. Here is a map of many other dimension reduction techniques. So these can be split into two big categories. One is keeping the most important features. One is finding a combination of new features. So keeping the most important features, that includes like random virus, forward selection, backward elimination. Where PCA lies in this, it's a linear method, and it's a linear combination of new features. There are also a bunch of really neat and novel non-linear methods, including variations on PCA, like kernel PCA, and then the famous one, T-SNE, and a bunch of other ones. So digging a little deeper into here, we see that, again, if we keep the most important features, there's no transformation that's needed to be applied to the features. And then if we do find a combination of new features, there's a new set of features that contain values, different values, instead of the original values. And it's important to note, so besides these methods, there's new ones coming up every day, or I should say, like, there's fresh ones every year, it seems like. And then one of these examples is UMAP, which is not even on here, and it's called Unifold Manifold Approximation and Projection for Dimension Reduction. So it can be used to visualize patterns of clustering in high dimensional data. And then, depending on how much time we have here, so these are some of the sources, and these are some of the really nice illustrations regarding the new ways of clustering data and reducing the thousands, if not millions of variables sometimes that we have, and then just keeping the most important ones. And then again, PCA is one of the most famous ones, and T-SNE, UMAP, and a bunch of other ones are just as valuable in other circumstances. There's trade-offs in each. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. Very good presentation there. Anybody else that's in 422? That was a good presentation, for some of the topics, we're covering in that class right now and in the near future. So thank you for going ahead and going over that, Alan.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Okey doke. Our next person here to go is Sanaya. If you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Logan. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I think we just need, Alan, can you stop sharing there and then I think we'll be good?
Yes, let's see. I think I stopped
Oh, you're
sharing.
good. We can
Okay.
see your screen there now. Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be presenting on the Data Explorer package in R. So exploratory data analysis, or as we largely call it, EDA in data science, is probably the most important, time-consuming, and underrated parts of data science. Unfortunately, not the cool machine learning models, which tend to be a little bit easier to run once you have a nice clean data set that you're familiar with. And in terms of EDA, I find visualizations to be the most effective way to get familiar with a particular data set. So I stumbled upon Data Explorer when I had to work mostly in R for a course in this program. And prior to that, I've worked mostly in Python, and that was a programming language I was most familiar with. But some of the starter code I had gotten for this particular class was in R. So, this package in particular answers a very important question. What if EDA did not require you to be a strong coder in the particular programming language, and instead you could do a bulk of it using just one function? And that's where Data Explorer comes in. So there's one function that can really do it all, and it's called create report. So basically you insert the data set, the data frame into this particular function, and it will spit out an HTML file, which has a table of contents as well as visualizations of the data on a very basic high-level basis. If you already have some familiarity with the data, and let's say you have a target variable in mind, you can customize this create report function to create visualizations catering to that particular variable. So you can also select which visualizations you want to display at all as well. You don't have to do all the ones that are built into the create report function. So in a nutshell, this is how you would install the package in R for Data Explorer. And I'm just gonna quickly run through some of the functions that are within that create report functions, so you can get a little bit of a feel for what it can do. So similarly to a summary function, we have introduce, which will basically give you a high-level view of the data, how many rows, columns there are, what type of data is missing, what's complete, and you can also visualize that. It'll also give you the number of missing rows, for instance, so you'll have an idea of, whether to impute those in the future or omit them from your data. So that has been pretty neat. And then also it dives into visualization, so you can get a feel for the distributions of the different discrete and continuous variables. It's also able to judge which variables are discrete versus continuous as well, which is helpful. But if you wanted to only display these, for instance, the distributions of the discrete variables, you could go into the create report function and then just use these plot bar functions instead. And this is similar just for the continuous variables with the QQ plots and the bar charts. Another cool thing is it will put together a heat map for the correlations, which can be helpful for feature selection. You know, highly correlated features, you might want to consider whether you want to use all of them for modeling purposes or not. So this visualization, which is also in the default function, create report, tends to be rather helpful. And another cool trick is it also does principal component analysis, as was described in the previous presentation, so I won't go into too much detail. So all of this can be done in one neat, tidy function, create report, or you can customize and say, okay, I only want to see the PCA and the original summary of the data and the data that's missing. So you can go as high level or in the weeds as you want to get using DataExplorer. Also, in terms of some of the initial data preparation steps you would take in a data science project, the DataExplorer package also simplifies further. There are very easy ways to basically group different features. And then also if you wanted to drop columns or impute values, that's also much easier to do in very few lines of code. So in conclusion, DataExplorer lets you perform EDA at a high level or allows you to customize further if that's what your needs are. I really like it because you can initially get a very quick overview of the data in just one line of code. And then if you want, you can really hone in on a target variable or multiple variables that you're interested in for further visualizations, which are also simplified within the package. Or you can do a regular EDA and move forward with modeling relatively quickly and painlessly. So, you know, when I was a beginner in R, I found this package very helpful because I can get a decent familiarity with a data set. And in real life, a lot of the data sets you use don't have a nice and clean data dictionary, the way some of the Kaggle data sets do, for instance. So if you're working with data that you don't know much about, this is a great way to come up the curve. And that's about it, unless anyone has some questions.
No, great presentation there as well. Again, something, you know, folks can look into, you know, as well with that R package to go ahead and learn something new. It's not everything, you don't have to do everything in Python. You know, it's very nice to use some R packages, especially for visual reasons and data exploration. And even me in my daily job, I like to do the same thing as well. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Okie doke. The next person to go here would be Jeff. Are you ready to go here, sir?
Yep.
Okay, fire away. The floor is yours.
Thanks. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so today I'll be talking about doing some geocoding in SAS. I know there are, you know, alternative ways to do this with, you know, Python and other tools, but, you know, just in case your organization hasn't adopted Python but does have SAS, you know, in your organization, you know, this could be a viable option for you. Geocoding, I mean, as I think you all know, you know, you're taking an address and really trying to get, you know, normally, usually trying to get a latitude and longitude on a given street level address. And so within SAS, the procedure is called proc geocode. It is now a part of base SAS, a base SAS procedure in historical versions. It was part of the SAS graph package, but it is now part of base SAS. The only catch with this is if you are going to do it, especially for street geocoding, you are going to have to download some lookup data sets directly from SAS. And so I've included those links here and some screenshots where you can go and find those lookup files. You can see here it's a zip file of a little over 2 gig. Within that, there are multiple CSV files, some documentation, and then some provided SAS code that you can read those the CSV files into the required lookup data sets that you would need to reference when you do run the procedure. And of course, SAS has oodles of documentation on their website if you had specific questions about the procedure itself. The syntax is fairly straightforward. As I said, it's called PROC Geocode. And there are some key things that you should know about if you want to specify some optional parameters. No stymer. When the procedure runs, it's going to generate a whole bunch of notes in your log. No stymer turns that off. So I would highly recommend that. When you are doing the street geocoding, it's going to apply sort of like a waterfall approach, that if it can't find a match on the street level, it's going to then look to the zip code. And if it can't find it at the zip code, it's going to go and look to the city. If you don't want to do that for getting the latitude and longitude, and you want to really restrict it to only get the latitude and longitude on the street address, you can set no city and no zip to turn off that sort of default waterfall kind of approach. Lookup street, this is that lookup data set that you would have created that I mentioned on the prior slide, where you would have read in all those CSV files that you downloaded from SAS. So this is that permanent data set that would be used as part of the lookup. And then address var, city var, state var, zip var. These are your input address fields that you want to locate the latitude and longitude for. So a couple of tips. One, you want to make the zip variable to be numeric, not character. Two, this will work for street level geocoding if you don't need to have all three, city, state, and zip. You either need to just have the zip, or you need to have both the city and state. So it's an either or situation to get the street level geocoding to work. And then third tip, which I would highly recommend, is while you don't have to explicitly specify here when you call the procedure, these address var, city var, state var, zip var, I would highly recommend it, because if you don't, SAS is going to default to use, it's going to look into your data set to find city, state, and zip and take that. So if you had, say, for example, a mailing address and a property address, and your mailing address was called city, state, and zip, that's what the procedure would grab when maybe your intent was for it to use the property, city, state, and zip, the physical address. So I would recommend that as a best practice. In terms of performance, in this example, I ran 1.8 million records through, took a little less than an hour. And I got hits, street level hit of 1.6 million, and it was unable to find a match on 191,000 out of the 1.8. In terms of the data that's returned, some key fields that you'd probably want to keep, obviously the latitude and longitude, the geo-matched address, city, state, and zip. This is what it found within its lookup data set. And then it's going to give you some information about the match itself. Was it successful? What level did it match on? Some notes about the matching, and a score about the relative accuracy. And I'll talk about that in these next two slides. So in terms of the notes, the notes are going to contain some of these tokens. It tells you a little bit about what it was able to match on. And then the score is going to be the sum, of these tokens. So if it matched on the street name, it gets 20 points. If you matched on the city name, you get another 5, and so on and so forth. So that's what these tokens are in their relative values. So from a demo perspective, I created this as sort of like an interesting cross section, because you can see that we've got apartment numbers in different formats, apartment, unit, pound B. I've got some PO boxes in here, some kind of standard sort of addresses, and then obviously a bad address where like the information kind of shifted over, where the person was listed in the address, and the street address was listed in the city, and so forth. So obviously that's a bad address. So I wanted to see what would happen in that example. So in running the procedure just on that sample, note that I did not instruct it to limit itself to only street level matching. So we can see here in the output, and these are in the green, these are the results, and the blue was the input. So we can see here that it wasn't able to find it match on a street, but it did match on a zip, right? That's what all these yellow indicate. Obviously that bad address, no surprise, there was no hit there. And where we did have the street match, again, we can see those tokens and what the score, the sum of the value of those tokens mean, and what the score was for each of those street level matches. And what is pretty evident is that when we didn't get a hit on the street and it defaulted to the zip, it really had a problem with these apartments highlighted here in yellow. So what I then tried was, okay, well, let's see if we can parse that out. And so I took on the address, if I saw apartment unit or pound, I inserted a pipe delimiter before those, and then parsed the address field to separate the apartment or unit from the street address itself, and ran it again. And we can see that, where it was struggling before on some of these apartments, it was now able to successfully, find that street. So good, best practice to make sure you parse out the apartment and units to get just the pure street address before you run it through the procedure. And again, it's still not hitting on the PO box, so it's defaulting to the zip. So having proved that out, now I'm just going to force it to only look for street level matching, turning on that no city and no zip options, so it doesn't do that default. And you either find a street match or you didn't. That's the only two options. Again, we see the notes and the associated score from that matching. Out of the 1.8 million, this is sort of the distribution of the scores here. So 60% had that score of 65. Another 14% were 80. So call it somewhere between 85-90%. I'd say are probably pretty good matches from this procedure. So not perfect, but if you don't have Python or access to other tools, and again your organization does have SAS, I think this this could be a viable option for you. And that is it. So any questions?
No, great presentation there, Jeff. I think, a lot of organizations, especially some legacy ones, do still use SAS. It's not, this SAS has gone out of style or anything like that. It's just that the doggone thing's expensive. So a lot of companies, struggle to, budget licenses for it, but it is a great tool if you're able to go ahead and utilize it. So that's just my
and I noticed, and I'm sorry, I neglected to say that I'm in 498, in the capstone class, finishing up the program. And so I noticed that Don had made available, and I didn't even know that we had this as an option, that we have an academic version of SAS Studio available to us. So I actually quickly signed up for that. The only problem with it was that it only comes with 5 gigs of space, which isn't enough to load the lookup data sets. But for anybody just wanting to play around with SAS, I mean, you do have the ability to do that.
No, thank you for sharing that. I don't think we do a good enough job of mentioning that you can at least get your feet wet with that a little bit and at least learn some of the functions. And back when I was doing the program, there was actually bonus points for completing programs in SAS.
Oh, wow.
It might have been for the 401 class. Maybe in 401, they still do that for the intro to stats. But yeah, Dr. Wedding's been here for about 10, 15 years or so since the beginning of the program. And they used to teach almost everything exclusively in SAS. That was the go-to under the predictive analytics program before it switched over to data science. And it was the bread and butter here for many years until about, I think, from what I can put together, about somewhere 16, 17, they started to transition it to R and then Python here really the last 4 or 5 years. So, and then of course, there's this whole other thing, and I'm gonna give my 2 cents on it because we're talking languages here, but Go. If anybody's interested, you can go ahead and look up Go. It's a data engineering language. The school here is really, encouraging you to learn that. I think some of the classes actually use it. In the real world out there, though, I don't see it much adoption yet, unless you're, you're working for a Google, a Facebook, an Alphabet, one of those companies. So that might be coming down the pipe, but I wouldn't invest too much effort right now into the Go stuff. Just, if you want to learn SAS, I think that's a great skill as well. So thanks again, Jeff.
Yep.
Okay, doke. I went through the list here of most of the people that have signed up so far, but I do know that we have a few other folks here. I'm not sure if you're, just here to, kind of learn something, which is awesome. You don't have to present, but want to make sure I don't miss anybody as well. Allison, Natalia, Elaine, did either one of you have a presentation or anything you wanted to talk about or present by chance?
Nothing for me.
Just listening in.
Okay, Allison or Natalia, did either one of you have anything as well? I want to make sure I don't miss you here.
No, I'm just listening in.
Okay, same with you, Allison, I assume? Okay. Okay, doke. Well, this went really well today. We got this done in about 45 minutes or so. If I missed anybody, feel free to go ahead and ping me here. Thank you again for, coming to the presentation and, learning from some of your classmates and, getting to see a couple, new tools that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to investigate yet or learn something about, the California Privacy Act. If you guys have any questions about the rest of the class for 422 or 498, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I put my cell phone and my email in there. I do try to check stuff in the evenings, sometimes early morning. It is when I'm in the hospital working, it is very hard for me to get cell reception. So if you call me or text me, I might not get the message until later in the day, until I'm out of certain areas where I get reception. So I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if I can help anybody with, career advice, things I've dealt with interviews or, looking at opportunities or anything like that, feel free to shoot me that too. And I can give you some feedback and some of the things I went through when I was considering making a jump. So again, stick to it. Everything will end up working out in the end for you guys. It's a very difficult program, but the reward in the end is worth it. So enjoy it. Continue to, I think one thing I don't talk about enough is continue to network with your classmates. If you have a moment, feel free to go ahead and join any of the SLC events, the Student Leadership Council. I was a part of that for a few years. They put on great events as well with speakers and networking events and things like that. So that's another opportunity for you as well to get to know some folks in your program. So stay engaged and feel free to reach out to me at any time. Okay, doke. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Logan.
Thanks.
Yeah.